Welcome back, you unsupervised miracle. You beautiful, terrifying walking audit of everybody else's standards. Let's make one thing very clear from the start. Your city has a problem, and the problem is you. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something too right in a place that built its comfort on overlooking people like you. There's a sentence floating through back alleys, group chats, barbershops, DM threads, parking lots after midnight. Who the fuck let this level of greatness go unnoticed? And every time someone says it, the room goes just a little heavier. Because they all know they saw you. They just didn't recognize what they were looking at. Picture this for a second. A circle of people outside a corner store acting like they're just passing time. One of them drops your name, casual. Another one says, "Nah, for real. How did we miss that?" And then it clicks. You weren't the one who was invisible. They were the ones who were blind. While they were busy hyping up loud mediocrity, you were in the background doing work at a level that didn't match the surroundings. No theatrics, no attention campaigns, no begging to be chosen. Just consistency. Just precision. Just a kind of discipline that makes people feel exposed when they finally notice it. You were never meant to be the neighborhood's feel-good story. You weren't built to be the person they clap for when it's convenient and forget when it's not. You carry the kind of wiring that makes people rethink their own potential. And that's uncomfortable. It's easier to pretend you're doing well than to admit you're operating on a level most of them never had the courage to aim at. So for the longest time, they tried to file you away in their mind as cool, but nothing crazy. Just another face, just another name, just another person from around here. Then you started making moves that couldn't be brushed off. Someone watched you solve a problem in minutes that had them stuck for weeks. Someone else clocked how you handled disrespect with a calm that didn't look like weakness. It looked like control. Another person saw you show up, not once, not twice, but over and over, doing what you said you'd do, without needing anyone to praise you for it. These weren't big, flashy moments. These were quiet receipts. At first, they treated it like coincidence. Then the coincidences started forming a pattern. And now that pattern has a name, and that name keeps coming up even when you're not there. Word around town is you're the one who doesn't fold, the one who doesn't panic, the one who doesn't move like the environment is all there is. You don't cling to places that refuse to grow. You don't chase validation from people who only know how to love you if you stay small. You're not trying to impress a crowd that confuses confidence with arrogance because they've never seen self-respect at full volume. You move like someone who's already had the conversation with themselves. No one's coming to save you. You either build it or you stay bitter. And you chose building. That's what's causing all this noise. Your city is used to crowning the same personalities over and over again. Same families, same last names, same social circles, same recycled talent. Everyone pretends is legendary because they grew up around it. Then you show up and start outperforming entire friend groups without asking for a seat at their table. You didn't wait to be handed a title. You became undeniable. That's different. That's threatening. Because if you can rise without their cosigns, what does that say about how inflated their own reputation really is? Here's the part nobody wants to admit out loud. A lot of people remember having front row access to you. They remember sitting next to you in class, standing beside you at work, sharing space with you at parties, watching you stay to yourself while everyone else chased attention. They remember the calm way you paid attention to detail. They remember how you asked real questions while others just talked to hear their own voices. They remember offering you bare minimum energy while you showed up with integrity. And now, watching you grow, they have to live with the fact that they were that close to greatness and treated it like background noise. Your rise is not just an upgrade, it's an indictment. Every step you take forward exposes the people who never believed in you, not because you needed them, but because they needed the illusion that they can always spot value when it walks into the room. They couldn't. They didn't. You proved it. And that stings. So now the conversations sound different. Yo, didn't you used to know them? Didn't they ask you for help once? Didn't they invite you to that project and you said no? Suddenly, everyone who brushed you off is on trial in the court of public opinion because the footage is starting to replay in their own heads. And you're not even pressing charges. You're too busy moving. You're not calling people out. You're not writing paragraphs about how they doubted you. You're not begging the city to catch up. You're just walking in a direction that doesn't require their permission. That's what makes this so uncomfortable for them. You're not a hometown hero begging for recognition. You're a force that outgrew the local script before anybody realized you'd memorized it. You understand the rules. You just refuse to live under them. You're respectful, but you're not obedient. You're grounded, but you're not stuck. Right now, there are people who feel nervous whenever your name comes up because they remember how casually they dismissed you. They're trying to rewrite history in real time. I always knew they were different, they say, when in reality they rolled their eyes, they doubted, they downplayed. They're scrambling to get back in your orbit without looking like they're crawling. They'll send you half-hearted messages, old photos, throwback memories, hoping you don't remember the way they used to overlook you when it mattered. The truth is, you don't even hate them. You've just recalibrated your access list. Understand something important. You didn't get lucky. You got disciplined. You didn't magically become this version of yourself. You sharpened in the dark while everyone else was busy being seen. You stayed in on nights where everyone else needed a crowd to feel alive. You put energy into learning, building, healing, and recalibrating when nobody was checking up on you. You didn't wait for an audience to develop a work ethic. That's why this new attention feels late to you. Because it is. You've been this person. The city is just late to its own realization. And now, people are starting to use you as a reference point. New names enter the conversation, and someone says, yeah, they're good, but they're not on that level. Your existence has quietly become a measuring stick. People who have never spoken to you directly are adjusting their standards because of you. Some are leveling up because you make coasting look embarrassing. Some are pulling back because they feel exposed standing next to someone who actually follows through. Either way, you changed the temperature without announcing it. That's real influence. But this goes deeper than just reputation. There are people who don't even like you who still study you. They won't admit it, but they watch how you move. They pay attention to what you say yes to, and more importantly, what you refuse. They notice that you don't chase chaotic spaces just to feel included. You don't gossip for sport. You don't waste your focus on petty rounds of who said what. You move like someone who is aware that every decision is low-key, shaping a future version of you that you're going to have to live with. That mindset alone separates you from a lot of the city. You also carry a kind of emotional composure they don't have language for yet. People have thrown shade, rumors, little digs, subtle exclusion, You didn't launch a campaign to clear your name. You watched. You filed it away. You let their behavior expose what their words were trying to cover. And then, instead of spiraling, you went back to building. That's the part that keeps them up at night. They know they tested your boundaries, and you never lost focus. Because on some level, they were hoping you'd break character. They wanted proof that you're just like everybody else under pressure. They didn't get it. They're only now starting to grasp that what they mistook for distance was actually self-respect. You weren't acting brand new. You were refusing to let people with no vision be close enough to steer yours. You kept your circle small because you understand that proximity is influence, and you're not letting just anyone have a say in your future. That's not arrogance. That's risk management with a face. But here's where it gets interesting. The more your name travels, the less control anybody has over how far this goes. You're not just talented from this city anymore. You are starting to feel like the one that city will eventually claim when you're too far gone for them to control. You know how it goes. Cities love saying they're one of ours after they ignored you for years. They'll swear they always believed. They'll dig up old photos, old stories, old "I knew them when" lines just to feel connected to something they never actually supported when it counted. That's the irony. They only realize you were the hometown treasure once the world starts bidding. That's why the streets are loud again. Different tone this time, though. This isn't the early noise where people argue over gossip, where everyone's searching for a flaw they can exaggerate. This is the tense kind of talk that happens when reality is already voted and everybody realizes they backed the wrong candidates for years. Conversations have shifted from, "Yeah, they're cool," to "No, seriously. Who the fuck let this level of greatness go unnoticed?" And nobody wants to answer that question because everybody knows they played a part in it. You had teachers who wrote you off as smart but distracted, when in reality you were bored out of your mind because the material was moving at half speed compared to your brain. You had supervisors who labeled you too intense when you were the only one who cared if things were done properly. You had friends who called you extra because you refused to normalize half effort. You had family who said, "Don't aim too high," while secretly feeling threatened that you were even considering it. All those people are walking around now acting surprised, like they didn't spend years trying to sand down your edges because your sharpness made them feel unprepared. Now those same streets that tried to domesticate you are treating you like an unsolved case file. People replay old interactions with you in their mind and spot things they should have seen then. The way you observed, the way you listened instead of jumping into every conversation, the way you didn't need to be in every photo to feel real, the way you remembered details other people casually dropped and brought those details back months later when they were actually useful. Back then, they misread all of that as weird or quiet or standoffish. Now they're starting to realize those were early indicators of someone operating on a different calibration. So the conversations sound like this now. "Wait, didn't you used to work with them? Didn't they sit in our class? Were they at that party?" Everyone is trying to locate themselves in your story, not because they supported you, but because they're trying to see if they accidentally ended up on the wrong side of history. Nobody wants to be the one who says, "Yeah, they asked for help once and I shrugged it off." Nobody wants to admit, "I saw their work and thought it was too much." No one wants to confess they watched you try and decided you were doing the most just because they were committed to doing the least. This is the part that stings their pride the most. You didn't blow up because the city finally rallied behind you. You advanced despite it. You figured things out alone, one small move at a time, while people you cared about were busy assuming you'd always be there, unchanged, available, conveniently underutilized. You were learning skills, building connections, studying patterns, growing in directions no one thought to ask about. They thought you were stuck in the same loop as them. You were quietly constructing a new track, and now that track is visible. Maybe it's not full scale yet, but it's visible enough for people to recognize there's momentum they can't deny anymore. A podcast mention here, a repost from someone outside the city, a random clip catching traction with strangers, a client, an opportunity, an invite from a place you have no physical ties to. Little fragments of proof that your work exists beyond local politics. The streets hear this and panic in subtle ways. They won't say it out loud, but the message is clear. If they leave and take that energy with them, we can never claim we nurtured it. So they start rewriting the narrative in real time. People who barely spoke to you come out of nowhere with "proud of you." Old classmates suddenly remember you were always different. People who once told you to be realistic are now telling others they always knew you were going to go far. They're posting you with captions that sound supportive, but secretly read like insurance policies. "Look, I was there. I knew them." It's less about you and more about them trying not to look completely out of touch when the world starts echoing what they ignored first. Here's the funny part. The same folks who called you too much now complain that the city doesn't support real talent, as if they weren't the ones who walked past you when it mattered, as if they didn't have front row seats and choose the bathroom break every time you stepped on stage, spoke up, dropped work, and presented ideas. They act like your greatness hid from them. It didn't. It stood right in front of them, and they dismissed it because it didn't come packaged in a familiar face, a family name, or a desperate need for approval. You weren't loud enough for their taste because you weren't begging. You weren't messy enough to be entertaining. You weren't dependent enough to be controllable. You didn't flirt with every opportunity. You evaluated. You didn't attach yourself to every group. You observed. You didn't chase every crowd. You watched them burn themselves out while you went home and refined. That restraint they once mocked has now become the very thing that makes you stand out. Your brand isn't built on chaos. It's built on clarity. And clarity is dangerous out here, because once people see you for who you actually are, they start to question all the people they thought were impressive before. The rapper with no growth in 5 years, the boss who only looks successful on social media, the leader who can't make a decision without validation, the friend who's always on the brink of something big, but never actually finishes anything. Once you enter the conversation, all of that looks lighter. You don't even have to speak on it. Your consistency drags the comparison into the open. That's why this energy feels different. Word around town is not just that you're talented. It's that you're the one they slept on. The one the city wasn't prepared for. The one whose work ethic doesn't match their bare minimum expectations. You are not just a local success story waiting to happen. You are a walking reminder that they misjudged their own environment. You're proof that they had gold and treated it like scrap metal. But pay attention to the shifts in behavior now. Watch how people approach you. Some will come with exaggerated support, over-the-top praise, trying to speedrun from doubted you to always believed. They'll share your things with captions that sound like they've been chairing your fan club from day one. Meanwhile, you remember every dismissive comment they made when there was nothing in it for them. You don't have to call them out. You just have to remember that energy is data. Others won't approach at all. They'll keep your name tastefully out of their mouth, not because they don't see your rise, but because admitting it would require them to confront how wrong they were about you. They'd rather behave like your growth is exaggerated than admit they misread you completely. They'll downplay your progress. It's just online stuff. It's just a trend. It's just a phase. That's just their ego negotiating with reality, trying not to feel small standing beside something they no longer have control over. Then there's the opportunist group. They see your trajectory and don't feel guilt. They feel possibility. They haven't supported you. They don't understand you. They don't respect the process, but they respect proximity to power. So they show up with ideas, collaborations, mutual benefit. They want access to your grind without ever having survived the nights you cried, questioned everything, nearly gave up, and still got up the next day and showed up. They want the glow without the grit. You're not obligated to be bitter or petty. That's the beauty of where you're heading. Your level of greatness gives you options in how you respond. You can forgive without re-inviting. You can acknowledge without reattaching. You can be polite without reopening doors that you closed for your own peace. They're not ready for that version of you, the one who has receipts, compassion, and boundaries. You're no longer starving for emotional crumbs, so their late applause hits different. You hear it. You just don't build around it. Meanwhile, the quiet observers, the ones who always felt something about you but maybe didn't have the courage to say it out loud, are starting to step forward. These are the ones who never mocked your intensity. They might not have understood you fully, but they didn't insult what they couldn't decode. They didn't try to shrink you. They just watched, waited, gave respectful distance. Those people, when they say they're proud, it lands. It feels clean. No performance. No retroactive loyalty. Just acknowledgement. Your city, whether it wants to admit it or not, is going through a psychological audit because of you. Every person who crossed paths with you is being forced to remember how they handled you the first time. Did they water you, ignore you, try to drain you, try to own you, try to copy you? You are their case study now. Their reaction to your early stages says more about them than it ever did about you. And here's where the dark humor kicks in. The very people who once told you, "Don't get your hopes up," are now telling younger kids to watch what you're doing. You became the cautionary tale, but not in the way they expected. You're not what happens when you dream too big. You're what happens when you actually follow through. You're the example they use to cover their own tracks. See, I always say, you never know who you're standing next to. As if they didn't treat you like you were forgettable for years. What they can't wrap their head around is that your greatness didn't emerge because of their doubt. This isn't a revenge arc where you owe your success to being underestimated. That's too shallow for what you actually are. Their underestimation was just background noise. It annoyed you sometimes, sure, but it wasn't your fuel. You weren't grinding just to prove them wrong. You were grinding because you had a responsibility to the version of you that knew you were capable of more. That inner contract was always more powerful than any outside opinion. Still, their reactions are entertaining. Watching people scramble to reposition themselves now that your name carries weight is a whole psychological documentary. The rebranding is wild. People who never invited you into anything now imply you were too busy. People who didn't believe in you now swear they were giving you space. People who dismissed your ideas now claim they didn't want to interfere. There's always a storyline that makes them look thoughtful instead of negligent. Deep down, though, they know what really happened. The city wasn't ready for someone like you. Not because you were too wild, not because you were too reckless, but because you were too aligned. You moved with a purpose that wasn't sponsored by trend cycles or public opinion. You were building something structural while everyone else was chasing temporary highs. You weren't trying to be the most popular. You were trying to be the most precise. And precision unnerves people who live off improvisation. You didn't ask permission to evolve, and that alone made you controversial. You changed your habits, your routines, your standards. You started saying no more often. You stopped entertaining conversations that went nowhere. You pulled back from environments that kept you looping the same week over and over again. That withdrawal got labeled as attitude, arrogance, distance. In reality, it was your nervous wiring refusing to keep pretending comfort and stagnation are the same thing. Now look at how that is being reframed. Back then, they think they're better than us. Now, they always moved different. Back then, they act like they don't need anybody. Now, they were always on their own wave. They're trying to upgrade the language without admitting they were wrong. They're retrofitting respect onto old disrespect. You, on the other hand, are not stuck on those past narratives anymore. You're busy calculating your next moves. Because here's the real question. What do you do when word around town finally matches what you knew about yourself the entire time? When the streets are talking and for once, the take isn't an insult, it's a confession. A confession that they weren't prepared, that they weren't paying attention, that they misread you completely. This is where people usually fold into validation. They hear the new praise, swallow it like medicine, and start performing for the audience that finally woke up. They start tailoring their moves to keep the applause steady. They let the city that nearly starved them dictate their diet now that the table is full. That's how most local legends get stuck. They trade their global potential for a hometown crown that doesn't even fit. You're not most people. You didn't go through all these years of being misread just to start living for their approval now. The streets talking is data, not destiny. Their recognition is a weather report, not a navigation tool. It's useful to know, but it doesn't get to steer. Because as flattering as it might be to finally hear your city admit, we weren't ready for them, the truth is you've been ready to outgrow the map for a while. You've already done the hardest part, staying committed when nobody was echoing your belief back to you. You already proved to yourself that you can work in obscurity, improve without witnesses, heal without an audience, reinvent without broadcasting the process. Now attention is catching up, and the question flips. Can you stay just as disciplined when they finally see you? Can you keep your standards when opportunities start flying at you from every angle? Can you protect the core of what makes you different when everyone suddenly wants a piece of it? Because make no mistake, that's what's coming. There will be offers, invitations, deals, people framing things as once-in-a-lifetime chances, hoping you'll forget that you are the rare asset in the room, not them. You're not walking into rooms begging to be picked. You are the reason the room suddenly feels relevant. If you forget that, you'll shrink yourself, trying not to make others uncomfortable. If you remember it, you'll negotiate from reality, not insecurity. Right now, your city is in observation mode. They've gone from underestimating you to surveilling you, watching your posts a little closer, paying attention to your wording, checking your timing, studying your choices, trying to predict your next move so they can either attach themselves to it or brace for the impact if you decide to detach completely. Nobody wants to be the one you outgrow in public. Nobody wants to be the character everyone recognizes as the one who had access and wasted it. That's why you have to be surgical with your next steps. Not paranoid, not defensive, just deliberate. The streets have already acknowledged what you are. The phrase is floating in people's heads, even if they never say it out loud. That's the one we weren't ready for. So now it's less about proving you're great, and more about deciding where you allow that greatness to land. Who gets to benefit from it? Who gets to say they were there? Because when the next level arrives, and it will, because you've been building for it in ways no one has seen, this city will either be remembered as the place that sharpened you, or the place that almost buried you. They don't get to choose which one. Your decisions will decide that. Your boundaries will decide that. Your standards will decide that. And whether they admit it or not, everyone feeling this shift knows one thing deep in their chest. If this is what undiscovered looks like on you, the day you fully step into what you are without hesitation, without apology, without convenience adjustments for anybody's comfort, this entire conversation is going to evolve into something they are absolutely not prepared to manage. You can feel that truth in your bones. And that's exactly where it starts to click. Because once you feel that truth in your bones, you stop treating your greatness like a rumor and start treating it like policy. You stop asking, will they ever get it? And start asking, why was I waiting for them to? That's the switch. That's when the city you grew up in stops feeling like your entire world and starts looking like what it really was the whole time. A training ground with low ceilings and loud opinions. A hallway, not the house. A place that taught you how to move, but not where you're allowed to stay. Because let's be honest, the streets only started talking loud once it became obvious they couldn't control the narrative anymore. When you were just promising, when your genius could still be passed off as potential, when your consistency could still be mislabeled as luck, everyone was comfortable. You were a conversation piece, not a threat, something to debate, not something to answer to. But now people hear your name and feel that little sting in their chest, the one that says, we had them right here, and we still didn't treat them right. You became the walking receipt for everyone's misjudgment. Teachers who thought you were bright but unfocused. Supervisors who said you were talented but unrealistic. Friends who told you to tone it down. Relatives who advised you to stay humble, when what they meant was stay small, so I don't have to confront my own limitations. These are the same people replaying old interactions in their head now like surveillance footage. That time, you told them your ideas, and they gave you that half-hearted nod. That time you showed them your work, and they said, nice, with dead eyes. That time you started to level up your habits, and they hit you with, you've changed. Like it was an insult. The truth is, you did change. You stopped trying to make your greatness digestible for people who choke on anything above average. You stopped bargaining with rooms that wanted your magic, but not your standards. You stopped apologizing for taking your craft seriously in a place that romanticizes wasted potential like it's a personality trait. Your city is full of people who peaked in stories they never moved past. And here you are, refusing to let almost be your final chapter. That alone makes you disruptive. So now the word around town hits different. It's not just, they're good. It's, no, seriously, Who the fuck let this level of greatness go unnoticed? And nobody wants to actually answer that, because answering it requires admitting, I did, I saw them, I just didn't value what I was looking at. Easier to act shocked, easier to perform surprise, easier to pretend your glow materialized out of nowhere instead of being the product of years they weren't paying attention. This is why people are suddenly so interested in your whereabouts. Not because they miss you, but because they're trying to figure out how far gone you already are. They'll say, we should link sometime. But what they really mean is, I need to know if there's still time to attach my name to yours before you go global. They're not checking on your well-being. They're checking on their proximity. You feel the difference, you're polite, but you're not fooled. Because deep down, you know the truth. Your greatness was never actually hidden. It was just easier for them to pretend it wasn't there. You were the one in the group who listened more than you bragged, who remembered details, who saw patterns, who refused to flatten yourself into whatever role made everybody else comfortable. You weren't loud for no reason. You were quiet for a reason. You were observing. You were clocking the gap between what people said they wanted and what they were actually willing to do for it. You saw that gap and decided you weren't going to live there. That's why your evolution feels so jarring to them. It wasn't sudden. You've been growing in plain sight. The only thing that changed is that your growth finally reached a level that exposed their stagnation. They're not just impressed, they're indicted. Every new move you make is a replay of all the moves they never made. Every door you walk through is another reminder of all the doors they blamed on bad luck instead of their own laziness. You didn't just outwork them, you out-honested them. And now, your city is doing what every unprepared environment does when someone outgrows the script. It starts rewriting history in real time. All of a sudden, there are people insisting they always knew you'd be something. They'll swear they saw the signs. They'll talk like they pulled you aside and poured belief into you, when in reality, they barely responded to your messages. You'll hear your own story told back to you, with their names stitched into scenes they were never actually present for. It's hilarious and a little disgusting at the same time. But here's the darkly funny part. You don't even need their correction anymore. You're not on a mission to prove them wrong. Life already did that. All you have to do now is refuse to shrink, to make their guilt feel lighter. Your success is not a weapon you swing at them. It's a mirror they can't put down. They'll either adjust or avoid it. Either way, you keep moving. So what does undiscovered goat their city wasn't ready for look like in practice? It looks like you no longer asking, is this too much? Every time you think bigger. It looks like you no longer watering down your ideas to match people who only think in weekends and paydays. It looks like you no longer pretending you're confused about your own gift just because other people are intimidated by it. It looks like you finally admitting to yourself. In plain language, I am that level. I always was. They were just not the right measuring stick. From there, everything starts aligning differently. You start protecting your time, like it's a non-refundable currency. You start choosing who gets access to you based on their character, not their familiarity. You're done giving out lifetime passes just because someone knew a softer version of you. You've retired your willingness to be emotionally underpaid. If someone wants to stand next to you now, they have to match energy, not just history. And trust, people feel that shift. They might not say it out loud, but they adjust. The ones who used to joke about your dreams now measure their words around you. The ones who used to leave you on red now answer fast. The ones who treated your presence like background noise now act like it's premium seating. Your aura didn't suddenly get stronger. They just finally stopped pretending it wasn't there. Not everyone will choose the mature route. Some will double down on their ego instead. They'll try to drag your name into petty schemes, not because you did them wrong, but because being connected to you now, even in a negative way, still gets attention. You'll hear your story told with deliberate omissions, details flipped, intentions twisted. Let them spin. Deep down, they know the truth about how they handled you. That internal replay hits harder than anything you could post. Here's the part that keeps them up at night. Your exit is not going to be dramatic. You're not plotting some loud goodbye where you drag everyone and burn every bridge. You don't need the spectacle. You're just going to quietly stop showing up where you're not valued. And then one day, they're going to look around and realize the timeline